Well, hello. Thank you for joining me once again. I am continuing the reading of The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis. We are on Chapter 10, and this will be Chapter 10, Part 1. Okay? Thank you for those who have subscribed. Welcome to all the new subscribers. And if you haven't subscribed, now is a perfect time. Do hit that like button and let's get started, okay? Chapter 10, Free Will, the Universal Law of Cause and Effect, and the School of Prophets. One morning, when I was feeling sorry for myself, and subsequently, I was missing my old friends, I had run into Anastasia and was telling her about the friend who had chosen to marry his pregnant girlfriend, and thus he wasn't here. I went to my womb and began to meditate. As my mind wandered out of control while I tried to meditate, I started thinking about my friend, choices, and whether I really had chosen my lifestyle, or if it was just destiny or the way the deck was stacked. None of us had any choices in the matter. At this point, I only let my mind get away with the idea of thinking about destiny and free choice. But the next step would have been thinking things like, why couldn't I have just been a lawyer like my mother wanted me to be? It sure would have been easier, and in a year, I'd have been driving a Mercedes or a Porsche. They would have been pretty wild thoughts, but they do happen when you don't control them. It was midday on the same day that I reached my terminal exhaustion point. As I was preparing to hit that mat and get some sleep, I again began to ponder all the strange events in my life and how it seemed like destiny was at work. Perhaps no one has any choice, I thought. Perhaps everything is all predestined. I knew I was destined to be where I was. There was no doubt in my mind about that. Just then, I heard a voice outside my curtain of my womb chamber. It was Zayn, talking to another novice monk, and probably to me indirectly at the same time. Free will is the most important legacy we have from the universal spirit. We are constantly being presented with choices in life, forks in the road that lead to different places. Free will lets us choose. The ability to choose gives us the power to take our life in any direction we want, and thus do virtually anything we want with our life and create our future life. But it was our free will choices that got us in trouble in the first place, in separating from God. Most importantly now, used properly, it is what gives us the ability to get out of the hole we dug ourselves into and get back to oneness with God. Strange timing, I guess it was destiny. No, how could there be destiny if free will choices changed our future, our destiny? The next morning, Zayn told me that our monastery was also known as the School of the Prophets. And it was time for me to begin the particular studies and training in the ancient Atlantean methods that create certain prophetic abilities, deep concentrated contemplation, realization of cause and effect, free will, and destiny. He had my reading list ready. Later, I read some of the teachings from the ancient text. Okay, once again, we have italic writing for the ancient text. Okay? Foolish child, Know not that you reap what you sow? What will you have done today in your life and those of others? Pray, do you? Know not that you have free will. To be a fool for God is to be a true child of the law of one. Learn the ways of universal law, of cause and effect. As we break the law, so do we lose our freedom. Recognize your free will. Realize your free will. Know your free will. Use your free will in harmony with universal will and be free. Every moment we come upon another fork in the road, every moment we choose our way, our destiny. Every action creates reactions. Choosing not to act is an action with a reaction. If you choose not to actively serve the light, you are choosing to actively serve darkness. If you choose not to actively serve the universal spirit, you are choosing to actively serve the selfish separate self, the collective selfish self, and evil. No choice have you but to choose. Choose you will, between darkness and light, between good and evil, between give and take, between love and hate, between selfishness and selflessness. Where you are, where you have been, where you will be, is affected by your choice. Every fork is a way to serve God or run from God. Think you that you can hide from God? Think you that you can run from yourself? Think you that God is not one and all? Think. Our consciousness is the result of our own choosing. Where you are is where you have come. Where you will go is decided by how you are. We forge our will in the fires of our suffering. We temper our will in the waters of discipline. When one applies free will to achieve freedom from the separate self, the self causes pain. The one who chooses the path of selfishness finds that pain and suffering follow him eternally. The one who chooses the path of unselfishness finds that path and suffering are but a passing storm. Interfere not with free will of others, as you would not have them interfere with yours. Interfere only with the free will of those who are interfering with the free will of others. Free will directs the mind. Mind creates reality. On all planes, all things come first from the mind. With free will, we choose our destiny. We are destined to choose the destiny we have freely chosen. Spiritual schizophrenia. Reading the old text helped both and created new questions and confusion. So I asked Zayn for clarification. We all have both a selfish separate self and an inner being that is one with the universal spirit. In this sense, every human has a sort of split personality. We are all kind of what you would call schizzy, with these two sides, these two people living within us, and they are in total opposition. The free will dictates which of these two sides will have its way in our life at every given moment. I know what you mean about the two sides in us, and the internal battle is unbelievably hard at times. Indeed, it is, Peniel. The struggle is nothing less than the war between good and evil. There can be no harder battles, and with our free will, we can decide who wins the battle and ultimately the war. Sometimes we have thoughts and feelings that are from one side, sometimes from the other. Have you ever seen the old cartoons in the movie theaters where the devil is sitting on one shoulder and an angel on the other, both whispering in our ear, trying to influence us one way or the other? Then one of them finally wins out. Well, how does one of them win out? One side is stronger than the other within us? Yes, generally, but no. That is not why one side wins out over the other, just which side may have more voice or influence. One side wins out over the other simply because we use our free will to choose which side we will go with, which side we will lend our mind to, our attention to, our thoughts to, and ultimately which side we will lend our actions to. Free will is the one thing that gives us the ability, the power, the choice, to choose between our negative self and God. And the results of our choices change everything in our life and the lives of others. But it seems like in some people, the bad side is stronger, or the good side is stronger. And the influence is so strong that it's not just a matter of a balanced free will choice. Excellent perception. Every person has a different level of consciousness. You know, every individual has a different level of how giving or how selfish they are. Some are higher, leaning more towards the universal spirit, some lower, leaning more towards selfishness. But what makes that consciousness what it is? Free will? It is the result of our accumulated use of their free will. Thus, the world is full of a variety of so-called good and bad people to all kinds of degrees. For instance, some people are just not very nice on the bad side, and others are really bad, rapists, murderers, etc., more deeply on the bad side. Their consciousness is a result of using their free will over time. For instance, someone who has more often chosen selfishness over time will have lower consciousness than someone who has more often chosen unselfish love. So each individual has made one side primarily stronger than the others. Yet, in the worst, there is still a divine spark of universal consciousness buried deep within them. And in the best people, except for the enlightened ones, there is still the seed of selfishness. Thus, all can still break from their norm at any time and make different choices and change their consciousness and thus even turn their lives around just by applying free will one step at a time. building a new life one stone at a time. Are you not in the process of raising your consciousness by using your free will to override your past habits and consciousness? Free will and suffering. Yes, I am. And I do see the results. But Father, sometimes it is so hard to make and stick to the right choices. It is so hard that it is painful. Sometimes it feels like you're going to die. If you think about it, Peniel, were you free from pain before you started using your free will to become a better person? People who have not become totally unselfishly loving beings are always in pain, always in internal turmoil. They have an unrelenting, unpleasant disturbance within them that they are constantly trying to emotionally cover up and get distracted from. They are always trying to distract themselves from this with selfish thoughts and diversions. Talking with friends, becoming a workaholic, eating, shopping, sex, affairs, TV, playing or watching sports games, magazines, etc., even drinking and drugs. They do all these things to run from the part of them that is God within them. But just like there is no running away from yourself, there is no real getting away from God. There is no peace without oneness with God. There is constant dis-ease and no rest for those who are trying to get away from God. As we just discussed, everyone has this spiritual split personality composed of selfishness, the devil inside, using Christian terms, and universal spirit, the Christ side. We also discussed how sometimes we have thoughts and feelings that are from one side, sometimes from the other, and some of these feelings are painful. But won't it ever stop? We are always faced with choices between our sides, between being selfish, wanting and taking, or being selfish, considerate and giving. And we find that by making a selfish choice, we create new karma that causes suffering. And the lack of doing God's will and being separate from God creates pain, loneliness, emptiness, and gnawing dis-ease deep down. It is the spirit part of us that then seems to be giving us pain. The conscious seems to be giving us pain. But this pain is, in truth, simply coming from the selfish separate self that is trying to resist the natural flow of forces of the universal spirit. Sometimes people think that by choosing to run away from God and delving deeper into a selfish materialistic life, they can escape the pain. But they never can. The inner voice may get suppressed and may get hard to hear, but the pain and disease is always there. So it won't ever stop no matter what you do. Yes, but let me finish. You are still thinking that you are suffering new pain by going through the tribulations that will lead you to enlightenment one day. But think about your past with an open mind. Remember what it was like in your life when you hid from the light. Remember the pain of squandering your life in darkness and despair. The more you hid from the light and the more you delved into selfishness, the worse the spiritual ache got. Even as numb and detached as you were able to make yourself, even with drugs and alcohol, you still had severe pain and dismal feelings of hopelessness and loss. Excuse me. It can never be any other way when you choose the selfish path. You will always have pain, and you exert constant energy, struggling forever to block out God. And you can never be happy or have peace. The most you can hope for with a selfish path is temporary pleasures, what you call get-offs. And the pleasures you get from temporary get-offs never fully satisfy. It always leaves you wanting more. And what's worse is that you have to pay for the get-off with an equal measure of its opposite. And what's the opposite of pleasure? And on top of all that pain, life also keeps hitting you with the results of your karma. It only happens once in a while, but it's bad when it does. You know what I mean? Think about the worst times in your life, your darkest hours, the times life hurt you, leveled you, brought you to your knees in pain. Why do you think it happened? What was life telling you? What was God telling you? And when you were hit with such pain, didn't it force you to be introspective, to question your life or life itself, at least for a moment? Yes, that is why I searched for spiritual answers to life, searched for God and peace of mind. But it is like my pain is getting worse now that I am spiritually growing and doing the right thing with my life. Shouldn't the pain be getting less? It is a different kind of pain from a different source. You see, suffering is what brings most people to the spiritual path in the first place. They eventually realize that the only way to end the kind of suffering they're experiencing is to turn back to God, to abandon selflessness, to be kind, caring, giving, unselfishly loving. But once they really start the process of spiritual growth, they find that they are experiencing a great deal of pain from the self, from their ego. Rather than the aching of the spirit, the pain of dealing with your own negative creations, your karma, the self begins throwing a tantrum because it is not getting its way. It begins to manufacture contrived thoughts and emotions to give you pain. Extreme pain, like you said. Sometimes it feels like you're going to die. It gets so bad. That's because your separate selfish self is facing a death of sorts. And the closer you get to killing your selfish separate self, the more it gives you pain. It lashes out wildly like a cornered animal fighting for survival, which it is. So, as it turns out, you have to deal with pain either way. Whether you're living a selfish life or an unselfish life. So, why not just go with the selfless path? Zayn's intensity level jumped several notches. Because there is one very big important difference. Let's say you chose to give into the selfish side in order to indulge yourself and to avoid the sufferings that come from choosing to walk a path of unselfish love back to God. If that's what you choose, you will forever be in anguish in many ways. You will forever feel the relentless gnawing in the pit of your soul. Even if you make nothing but negative choices and take nothing but the negative forks in the road, it is impossible to ever completely block out the angle to block out the angels on your shoulder who causes the gnawing pain. Because as long as you have life, you have a soul, you have a spirit, and an inner being dwelling within you. You must have the spark of spirit animating you within you, or your body dies. Thus, you will always have that pain. And you don't just have the spiritual pain and the conscious pain. You are still stuck with pain the self gives you, and not just a little pain. Do you think you shed the pain of selfish emotions just as insecurity, greed, anger, and jealousy when you choose the dark, selfish path? No. You know that your most selfish hours have given you the most pain. It is your dark times when you have felt the terrible emotional pangs of jealousy or anger or even hate. The selfish path is the one that actually creates jealousy, builds jealousy, and all the other painful and pointless emotions. For instance, jealousy is nothing but one of the tentacles of selfishness. Possessiveness is selfishness, and it's accompanied by the terrible feelings of insecurity and jealousy. And whether it's a little kid screaming, "Mine," over a toy he doesn't want to share, or a big kid screaming, "Mine," over the ultimate possession, a human being, a lover, or mate, it's all the same. If you think you're going to get away from self-pain by choosing the selfish path, think again. All you get is a spoiled self that is out of control. Just look around you. Look at the normal relationships people have. They are full of turmoil and pain. People in normal, selfish-based relationships constantly cheat on each other, hurt each other emotionally, physically hit each other, or even kill each other, all the while feeling awful pain. And you will always still have the pain and suffering from your negative karma coming back to you. And it feels all the worse because you have not developed the ability to transcend yourself at all. Just the opposite. You've chosen to be fully entrenched in yourself. You've chosen to float in the sea of possessiveness, jealousy, greed, lust, hate, and anger. Plus, the choice of the selfish path keeps creating more negative karma that will keep coming back to cause you more pain and suffering. So again, we are just all destined to suffer no matter what we do? Yes and no. The type of suffering you are experiencing now will vanish when you reach the end of your path and become enlightened. And you have already rid yourself of the pain you had in your past that made you want to commit suicide. Have you not? Yes, no question about that. If you chose the path of light to avoid the sufferings and pain that comes from living selfishly and separate from God, you no longer have the spiritual path or the conscious pain or the pain of an out-of-control spoiled self on a rampage. That is over for you. Sure, you will have to live the pain that the self gives you now, in fact, more of it for a while. They are your growing pains. And it may even include jealousy and anger, but it is only temporary. You will eventually lose the devil on your shoulder. And unlike the results of choosing the selfish path, the pain will finally stop. And you won't create any more negative karma. You can accomplish this just by making the right choices and waiting. Then you will no longer be walking the self-chosen, self-created path of living forever in anguish. You will change your destiny. Peace will be yours in time. Freedom from the pain of the selfish emotions like hate and anger, jealousy, will be yours in time. All you have to do is keep using your free will to keep walking the light path. Keep redirecting your mind to think loving, giving, caring thoughts. Keep remembering the rewards of serving God, love, ultimate security, peace, happiness, the joy of giving and seeing others lifted up and freed from their bonds of slavery to dark selfishness and its pain. You know these feelings exist. You have felt them sometimes. Those times when you have unselfishly loved just a little bit, or perhaps there is a time when you let go and surrender to God just a little more. Just imagine the joy and peace of loving completely. That is not rhetorical. Imagine it. Visualize it. I'm not sure you understand, Father. I have no doubts about my choice. I'm not wavering my conviction. There is no way I could ever turn away from the path of unselfish love. It was just that this pain was getting so bad that you don't think I understand? I'm sorry, I forgot. I know you understand better than I. Then I said a positive affirmation to myself. I will explain the use of affirmations in a later chapter. Remember, I have walked the same path you are walking now, as have so many others before me. I know it well. I know it better than you. And like I said, your pain will end with enlightenment. Thank God. I will. You have not yet even faced the worst of pain yourself is going to go through at you to prevent. Let me read that over. You have not yet even faced the worst of your pain yourself is going to throw at you to prevent its ultimate loss of control and prevent your enlightenment. So be prepared. I can handle it now that I know it's going to end. Don't rest on your laurels, Peniel. You are doing fine, but don't be too certain for yourself, or don't be too certain of yourself, or yourself will snare you. Until you have achieved universal consciousness, there is always a chance of you turning away from the light. Be prepared, and don't sit feeling confident. Feel committed and affirm that commitment daily. Think positive, good thoughts, but be vigilant, not complacent, not focus so much on your pain, but not so confident either. If you are not vigilant, your selfish, separate self will sneak up behind you when you least expect it. And when you think you are being your most spiritual, it will turn it to its disadvantage and take control. Spiritual ego is the greatest and one of the final dangers on the path. All of you reading this have experienced at least some of what Zain was talking about in the above segments. Some of you may have even tried a spiritual path and encountered pain and then resisted your path. You lived in pain and darkness before, and now you live on the edge of light and love, but you are still in pain and darkness. Why? In order to start the process that will ultimately free you from the path of these selfish separate self, you must fully commit to a path of unselfish love and apply your free will with constant conviction. Even in the face of pain, the self will throw at you. If you don't, you will keep wavering back and forth. You will keep getting pain from both sides. One side gives you some pain, then the other, and then the other. You don't get more total pain mind. You don't get more total pain, mind you. You just keep getting it from different sides. You just keep doing it on, and you don't make any progress towards permanently ending the pain. It can become an endless cycle. It's a trick of the negative self, and it can keep you a slave to self, a slave to the forces of darkness, and in an endless circle of pain forever. All the while thinking you at least tried or are trying to walk the spiritual path, but it was just too hard or too painful. Open your eyes, your mind, and look at it objectively. It is far more painful not to walk the spiritual path. I know, I have seen it from both sides now. You can also see a good example of this, one of the stories about Jesus that still remain in the Bible and the scripture of many other religions. The story of Jesus's internal suffering in the garden before his arrest demonstrates that Jesus had learned his lesson well and exhibited conviction in even the most dire circumstances. As Jesus was awaiting his arrest, he contemplated the terrible trials and tribulations he knew he would suffer in the immediate future unless he chose to change course. The time was up, and his disciples gave him no comfort or support. Even though he had asked them to stay awake and meditate with him that night, they slept and left Jesus alone with his agony. Jesus communed with the universal spirit and asked to have this cup taken away from him, but only if it was within the will of the universal spirit. A cup is a symbol of receptivity, and in this instance symbolized his receptivity to the will of God. And in this case, it meant all that suffering he would encounter using his free will to follow the will of God, even while Jesus asked if he could be released from being receptive in this instance and thus be released from the terrible fate that awaited him. He included, "But your will be done, not mine." While no one wants to suffer or really looks forward to experiencing the pain that many accompany doing their duty or meeting their karma, the truly wise know that if we do not align our will with the will of God and do the will of God, the subsequent suffering, the repercussions are far worse and will never end. True happiness and freedom are only found in aligning our will with universal will. Bottom line, if you want the pain to stop, you need to decide to take the path of love no matter what you encounter, and you need to want to change, and you need to maintain your conviction to accomplish your goal. Once you really set it, then simply apply yourself constantly, consistently, with all the tools at your disposal. I'm going to I think I'm going to stop there for the first part. And I'll pick up at the free will of others. Okay? So I have been reading The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. This has been chapter 10, part 1. Okay? So please, if you have not already subscribe, and thank you for those who have, and everyone take the time to push that like button so others can get this message as well. So until the next time, have the most benevolent day.